clarify, I have 2 boys currently, 1 girl, and 1 other boy on the way. So 4 kids total, and we are so thrilled. But I imagine in a room full of moms that maybe some of you can relate to me, but ever since having children, I have just become the world's worst shopper, specifically for myself. Like, I just can't get myself to buy myself things. It's hard. When it comes to buying for other people and my children, I find no greater satisfaction. And to buy outfits for the kids, they're so cute, those outfits, right? So I have no issue shopping for others, but when it comes to myself, it's a little bit more of an issue. And maybe some of it, there's more bodies to, clothe, and honestly, there's just more body to clothe, and so maybe that's part of it too. But I just can't pull the trigger, and it's not even just like the leisurely type of shopping. It's for things that are like overworn, could definitely use a replacement. Like sunglasses. I lost my sunglasses this past summer, which was such a bummer because I really liked them. And depending on the shape of your face, like it can be hard to find glasses you like the way the frames fit you. I have a small forehead, so that always makes things tough. And so I lost my sunglasses, and my favorite part about them was that they were inexpensive. And as a mom of littles, it alleviated that stress of them getting really scratched and banged up and potentially stepped on and, flushed in the toilet. And so and honestly, these glasses were so many of those things. They were really scratched up. They had like what seemed like permanent handprints on them. And when you folded them, they'd crunch because there were sand grains in them. So it would have been completely justified for me to purchase a new pair of glasses for myself. But because I don't like doing it, I just kept pushing it off. But because I lost them, I was forced to buy a new pair of glasses. What do you know? And I'm about 4 weeks into these new pair of glasses, and ladies, I can see so clearly now. The rain is gone. I can see things the way that they are intended to be seen, because with new glasses comes new lenses. No scratches, they're not bent, there's no handprints on them yet, and it's really been a game changer. And this got me thinking a lot about worldview, because worldview, the way in which we view the world, we all see the world through a certain lens. But depending on the lens in which we see the world through really dictates what we see, how we perceive reality, and ultimately the way we live in it. And I imagine you're here at Navigating Motherhood, you're eager moms learning how to be better moms, wives, friends. I imagine if you knew that there was a specific lens that would best equip your children on how to navigate life and help them know right from wrong and help influence the decisions they make, you would want them to have those lens. You would want to help them develop those specific lens. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about why it's important for our children to have the right worldview and how we can go about teaching them that. Because honestly, if we don't make this an intentionality of ours while our kids are young, while they're little sponges and they're soaking up everything we say and do, and we're the ones who are just their biggest influences, then we miss out on being the ones to teach them and develop that worldview, and we leave it up to all the other influences in their life to develop it for them. So let's start by just defining what a worldview even is. I've already alluded to it a couple of times, and it's in the word itself, honestly, but a worldview is a way in which you view the world. It's the way you see and understand the world that we live in. It's your picture of reality. And as one source puts it, it says, it's a collection of attitudes, values, stories, and expectations about the world around us, which inform our every thought and actions. It informs our every thought and action. So that's a big deal, the way we view the world, to know that the way we view it is going to determine those things. And whether you know it or not, whether this is the first time you're hearing worldview, we all have one. We have this grid, in a sense, in which we see the world. And you're not born with that grid. It's developed, right? You're born, and depending on your parents, your circumstances, the influences around you, the beliefs within your home, the things your parents did or didn't do, what your mom taught you, the way she treated others, every component you can think of helped you establish this grid. And when we think of the time that we get with our children, like I said, we are our children's biggest influence. We are the one who are establishing that grid for them, whether we have it on our radar or not. Arizona Christian University does an annual survey on Worldview, and this is what they said about this year's Worldview. They said, this year's initial wave of Worldview studies focuses on the life-defining beliefs and behaviors of parents because of the substantial influence they have on the worldview developed by their children. That's huge. They're focusing their whole study on the beliefs and behaviors of parents because of the influence that it has on their children's worldview that they develop. So that should really perk up our ears to remind us that we are the ones who are influencing it. And I mentioned that we all have one. And again, even if you're doing this purposefully or not, you are in your day-to-day teaching your kids. Some examples, we all teach our kids to say thank you or please, and if you're not, you should probably start, right? We all know the significance of teaching our kids thank you and please, and even if they don't talk yet, you might be doing sign language, please and thank you, right? Because we know it is good and honoring to have good manners and to be polite, but beyond that, we know people are important, and it's important to show our gratitude towards them. I mean, there's frankly nothing that frustrates me more than having to remind my children to say thank you for two reasons primarily. One, it is just not hard. It's super easy. And also, it's really a reflection of their lack of gratitude for something that's given to them, or maybe this sense of entitlement that they should have got what was given to them. And so we teach our kids to say please and thank you because it's important. I imagine all of you, especially being moms of little ones, you're teaching your children the importance of sharing, right? Because in our house, we say sharing is caring, because it is. Sharing is an act of caring. And we want to show and teach our kids that other people are more important than ourselves. It is important to put others before ourselves. Self-control. We're teaching our kids self-control at the youngest of ages, because when we don't teach our kids self-control, we see that down the line how that can just, become an issue. If your child has a complete tantrum when you say no to having their 15th snack of the day, which I use as an example because I'm right there with you, it's like if we don't control their emotions and their responses and implement ways to help them handle their emotions, what is that going to look like 15 years down the line when they don't get the answer they want, when they get a no? So we are really instilling this worldview whether we realize it or not. I mean, we're even putting in certain practices to help them. Daniel the tiger, anyone? He's got some great suggestions. When he's talking about self-control, sing along with me if you know the song, but if you feel so mad, you want to roar, take a deep breath and count up thank you to the one person that sang with me, and everyone else made me make a fool out of myself. But that's okay. You're welcome. It's really helpful. My 2-year-old, he goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and then he keeps counting. It helps. I practice it too sometimes. I'm like, okay, Daniel, we've got this. But we teach our kids these certain things they can do to help control their emotions. We teach them how to share. We teach them to have manners because we know it's important. And these are examples of things we are doing on the day-to-day to help develop that worldview in them. We just need to be purposeful about it. And I do see a lot of babies here and bellies here, and so don't check out because you're like, my baby's not, doing please or thank you. I'm just trying to get the baby to latch. Don't check out because this is for all of us. The study that I was telling you about at Arizona Christian University says this. Between 15 and 18 months of age is when most children start forming their worldview. And by the age of 13, it's almost completely in place. Okay, we're in the thick of those years. If your baby's not 13 months yet, it's going to be, and it's already going to have been developed. So whether your baby's a week old or 6 months, whatever it is, your baby is developing a view of the world. So no matter what the age, they are already establishing that grid, and we want to make sure that we're the ones helping them develop it. And so, okay, we understand the importance of developing that grid, but just any grid? What does it matter what kind of grid as long as they see, So we want to talk about why it is important for them to have the right view. Why, that's the second point. Why is it important to have the right worldview? It's important for them to have the right worldview because, it shapes everything about how they will live and the decisions that they make. The actions and the thoughts that they have, and how they view the world is going to reflect basically everything about their being. And I think when it comes to establishing healthy habits with our kids, we have like these two critical buckets when it comes to this. When we think of shaping our kids' health, we think of diet and we think of exercise. Those seem like it's the two most critical buckets in the life of a mom. When we think about diet, we try to feed our babies things that nurture their bodies. I am not against McDonald's, but if we gave our kids McDonald's every day, we're not feeding our kids nutritious things, and we're careful about that. You know, we want to help them to create healthy habits so that when they're older, their bodies are strong and healthy and good. We get vitamins, right? We buy vitamins so that their bones are developing strongly and that they're having strong digestive systems. We do all these things because we know that their diet is important. We get really creative with how to get them vegetables because that's just like a journey in itself. Being a mom is, how can I get my kids to eat anything green that's not a Skittle, you know? And so we get creative. I remember my sister, when her kids were little, she would blend, you guys might do this, she would blend spinach in their marinara sauce because the kids didn't even see it, but yet they're getting their greens because she knew the value in them getting their, nutrients through vegetables. My favorite is when I find myself saying this more times than I should, and I probably shouldn't admit it, but whatever. I love when I find myself going, eat your vegetables, and then you can have ice cream. It's like, let's get your nutrition in, and then we'll just top it on with some sugar. But you get my point. We see the value in them having a good diet. One study actually shows that 47% of mothers worldwide put nutrition as a top priority in their parenting. That's a lot. That's 1 out of every 2 moms think that nutrition is like the top of priorities that they try to enforce with their children. The next one is exercise. We all know exercise is important for our bodies, again, to develop strong bones and mobility. We know it is good for our kids to exert energy. We sign them up for all this extracurricular activities to keep their bones moving. And we plan play dates because we know they need to sweat. It's so important for people to sweat, especially boys. They need to sweat. They need to get their energy out. And so we see a lot of people put diet and exercise as a high priority when it comes to establishing these healthy habits for those kids. And clearly, these are all really good things. My punchline isn't like, stop. Like, these are all good things to do, and I'm not discounting that, but I think we also forget our responsibility for teeing them up for a good moral health, right? We look at their diet and their exercise, but what about their moral health? How are we feeding and developing good, healthy habits for them morally? And that's why it's important to have the right worldview. The stats are staggering how few have worldview anywhere on their radar. I mean, really, most people, and don't be ashamed if you're one of them because you're here today. By God's grace, you're learning about it, we can implement it, but very few people see the importance of worldview at all, especially one that includes God. And so take a look at these statistics. It says 2/3 of the parents of preteens claim to be Christian. 2/3 of parents of preteens claim to be Christian, but only 2% of them possess a biblical worldview. Only 2%. Another study says that only 6% of Americans have a biblical worldview. There's a lot of Americans, and only 6 of them have a biblical worldview, one that entails God, one that sees the importance of seeing through the lens of the Bible, of what God says and how we should live and what he says about this world that we live in and how we should live in it. Those are kind of alarming, right? But we're here and we get to learn, and our kids are still young. What a gift that we can implement this now before it's too late. We need to help them develop good and godly worldview so that they can be equipped to see the world around them rightly and then go on to be morally healthy adults. And I think arguably that this is by far the most important part of anyone's health, and it's because it doesn't just shape their shell, it doesn't just shape their outsides, it shapes their soul. And so we need to see the importance of investing in our children's moral health because it's not just shaping their outer shell, it is shaping their soul. Having a right worldview is one of the most important things we can focus on with our children. So, how do we do it? Well, what should we do? Help me out, Chelsea. So we're going to spend a bulk of the time just going over practical ways that we can implement that with our children. So how to teach your kids a biblical worldview. Let's talk about how we can do that. I'm going to go over 4 things, and within them, we'll funnel a lot of different ideas, but this is a great start for us in how to even get started implementing and bringing this into our home and putting it on our agendas when we're with our kids every day. And when we do anything in life, we usually start at the beginning. I guess, unless, you want to go to bedtime quicker and you start in the middle of a book. But more times than not, we start at the beginning. Like when we teach our kids the ABCs, we don't start at LMNO, even though it's so cute because they say LMNO, like it's one word. No, we start at the beginning. We start at ABC. We want to teach them the foundation of something. And so if we are going to try to teach our kids how to see the world through a biblical lens, the Bible is about God. He is the foundation. He is the start. So we want to, first step point is to teach them about God. Teach them about God. Genesis 1:1 says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." It was God who created the heavens and the earth. And so, of course, he is the very start. He is the creator, which we learned last week. And so we want to teach them, if we're going to teach them how to live life according to God, we should teach them about the one who created life itself. So we're going to teach them about God. And I know this is really counterculture. And if you don't agree, by all means, I would encourage you to express that and ask questions and voice your opinions and have that discussion, because that's good and healthy. You don't have to agree with me. But I highly encourage you to have that discussion at your group. And I know this is counterculture, but if we're going to rightly view the world through God, we understand that we are made for his purposes, not opposite, right? He created us. Anything that is created with a purpose. He is our creator, so he has created us with a purpose, not us creating an image of him in our minds of what we want him to be to us. That's not right. And so I know not everyone agrees with that or likes that, but he is our creator, and we should be living for his purposes and teach our kids that. And what a relief it is for them to know they even have a purpose because we have a God who created us. Maybe you've caught yourself saying this or someone said it to you, but has anyone ever heard, the world doesn't revolve around you? And I say it like that, in that weird kind of, because it's usually snarky. It's like, the world doesn't revolve around you. But there's honestly a lot of truth to that statement. And I'm not saying you should go about teaching your kid and hey, it doesn't revolve around you. But it is good for them to realize the world doesn't revolve around them. And I think specifically in these small years when they are so dependent on us, that it's really easy for them to think it is. Because we're having to cater to so many of their needs. And I am not saying you need to neglect your children, but I'm saying that there are definitely a lot of tactics that we can implement to make sure they realize you are not the only one to be taken into consideration. And ultimately, we need to make sure we are doing things according to God, his way first, really no matter what our preferences, what my preference is or what their preference is, right? Philippians 2, verses 3-4, is a verse that we recite often in my family. It's, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves." So think about the very example of, selflessness. We're all selfish people, it's not that fun to share. Just like kids, we want what's ours. We don't necessarily always like to give it out. But God knows best, and so we're going to do what God says because he created us, and he wants us to share, so we're going to share. So these are ways that we can talk about God to our children and teach them about who he is. So if we want our children to know about God and want to live their life for him and through a lens in which they see things the way he's intended for us to see them, we want them to know why. Why God? Why can we be so confident that it's his ways, not our ways, or it's his ways, not what the culture says? How do we know that he's the one that calls the shots? How do we know that we can be confident that he knows right from wrong, that he's unchanging rather than the culture that is always changing? How do we know? So this is big. We need to make sure that we understand and that we teach our children that God is holy. And so that is the second subpoint, is to teach them that God is holy. Because really, if they don't, and we don't understand the concept of God and his holiness, then what does it matter who we go to? But if he is the one who is the only source of truth, it's because he's the only one that's unchanging. He's the only one that's unchanging. I am always changing. Your table leader is always changing. The government authorities are always changing, right? Anyone we go to is changing. But when we go to God, he is unchanging. He is holy. Holy means perfect. Holy means that he has never sinned. He has never done anything morally wrong. He is entirely pure, and he is without blemish. There is no one else, I don't care how great they are or how close they are to you, that is perfect. He is the only one who we can be confident to teach our children this to, and for our children to learn this and be confident that he is the ultimate source of truth. So we want to teach them that God is holy. He's perfect. He's perfect. It's perfect. You always say, oh, my children are perfect. They're not perfect. And you know they're not perfect. I don't mean you to take offense to that. We just know we are not perfect, but God is perfect. So we want to teach them that God is holy. It makes me think of filters, right? We've talked a lot about like lens and views and filters. And when I think of filters, I think of social media. And, you've got Instagram and a whole bunch of hosts of different filters. You've got, I'm not big on Instagram, but I know there's like Juno, which I think like kind of denses the picture out or maybe brightens it up. And then you've got Gingham that I think denses and grains it a little bit. I don't know. And then you've got black and white, which my family doesn't use because we already are. And so you've got like all these different, it's true. It just doesn't work. You've got all these different filters, but when you go back to the beginning of Instagram, there's the normal, right? Which we would think of the God filter, right? There's the normal. It's the only filter that has a true reflection of the picture, and that is a holy God. If we do not view things through a holy God, every other filter that we look at the world through is one that's distorted and changed depending on our preferences and the world's influences. And so we want to make sure that we are filtering things through a holy and perfect God, because it is the only way we view things exactly how they are intended to be seen. So that is really big for us to do. Because if we don't see God as holy and perfect, again, we're not going to have our confidence in filtering things through him. So this is critical for us to grasp and to really learn about and to ask questions about. So I encourage you to do that. The other thing that God calls us to do is he calls us to be holy. And so we talked about how, children aren't perfect and we're not perfect, but he calls us to a perfect standard. 1 Peter 1:16 says, "You shall be holy, for I am holy." Whoa, okay, so I'm realizing the importance of me living in a standard in which God's calling me to, which is perfection. We're going to strive for that. We're going to fall short because we are not God, but he is calling us to perfection. And in that, we want to see the weight of us teaching our kid to live according to his standards, because we as moms have absolutely the responsibility of doing so. He's calling us to a standard of holiness. Our primary responsibility to prepare our children for life is for the one that God intends for them. Not what they want, not what we want, but what a perfect and holy God who has created them for. And we know that if we try to do things according to his plan, it will be so much more perfect than our own, I assure you. So those are the two first things we can do. We want to teach them about God. We want to teach them that God is holy. And so we're also going to talk about 3, saturate your home with biblically sound books, resources, songs, you name it. Saturate your home, your cars, wherever you go often, and your baby bag, throw books in there. Just saturate your rooms with books about the Bible is inevitably going to prompt discussion and dialogue. They're going to have these images. They're going to ask questions about them. I highly encourage you to do that. Such a practical way for us to implement bringing God into the lives of our children. When my oldest, who's now 7, was just a baby, I was navigating motherhood, and the concept of God and who he was and everything about the Bible was really new to me. I still had a lot of questions, and this is not by any means a shameless plug for our bookstore, but I think I went there just about every day after one of these sessions just to get books. Just to get books for my kids because I was eager to read to them. And quite frankly, I learned so much from them because at that time it was like the way that I could really understand these concepts about God and who he is. It made me understand in a way which I could relate to and then teach my kids about. And I got books 7 years ago that they're still some of our favorite books in the house. I just read one to my son last night, who's 2. Big Thoughts for Little Thinkers is such a sweet little series. I think there's 4, maybe 5. And they have these cute little characters that essentially are the main character of the story. There's Gracie, there's Angie, there's Mikey, and there's Gabe. And it's fun because they've almost become like friends in our house. You know, my 2-year-old will be like, I want to read Gabe. And so it's really sweet. So I encourage you to go and get books. They're going to help you. They're going to help your kids. If you have no idea where to even begin, you're like, okay, the bookstore is awesome and it smells really good in there, but I have no idea what books to buy. Start with the beginner's Bible. Start with the storytelling of Jesus. You know, like these books are the Bible in a way in which kids can understand them. They have a lot of illustrations. And so it's really going to help you prompt this dialogue about teaching your kids about God. And in those stories is going to be a way for you to learn and teach your kids how to navigate certain things in the world. For yourself, there's so many blogs out there, but one I definitely would recommend is Truth for Women. So it's Truth _for Women, and it's a blog written by one of our pastor's wives, Heather Pace. She is such a godly mom. She has 6 children, and she is an incredible mom, and she writes these articles on, things going on in the world or common tendencies that we see within our homes and how to handle them in a biblical way. And so that is a great way for us to be more equipped in how to handle certain situations with our kids. So I'd strongly encourage you to subscribe to blogs like that are going to help give you just good tips and tricks on how to implement Worldview into your homes. Sing songs. You can go on Spotify and look for kids' Bible songs, and there's songs out there that are even just scripture-based, and it's a great way to memorize scripture. Those are all just easy and, maybe seemingly obvious, but be intentional about actually listening to them. If you want to jam it out today, I'm telling you, go on Spotify and look up Camp Compass 2022. Some of my favorite songs on there. I got some nods. They've got some good beats. So go and listen to these songs, and you're going to learn about God. Your kids are going to be singing about God. What a great way for them to saturate their little minds with good content rather than a lot of the stuff that we can often hear on the radio. YouTube has endless sources too. Your kids might not necessarily watch TV yet, and maybe you don't like them to watch a lot, but there is, believe it or not, still good content out there. And if you go to YouTube and you go to Compass Bible Church, there's a playlist. And on that playlist, if you look up kids' worship songs, there's all the songs that they sing and dance to, and it's the cutest ever. There's also, if any of you were at story time this year, I was, and it was so fun. There's previous years of story times. They could watch those or biblically based stories. You can watch, they have done an amazing job at creating these videos that are different stories within the Bible, and they're fun and engaging and interactive. They're super animated. So I highly encourage you to check out those. So those are some resources available to you guys to just, again, get it into your home. You start to hear things. They start to ask questions. That is a way for you to establish a worldview. That is a good practical way for them to establish that. The last thing we'll talk about is the fourth sub-point. Point them back to God. Point them back to God is just a critical way that we can help our kids to start to view things through a biblical world lens, a worldview. Because kids do grow most familiar with the things that we talk about, right? They start to see what's most important to us, depending on how often it is talked about within the home. And so leverage every opportunity to talk about God. When you go to the park, when you go to the beach, talk about God's creation with them, right? We were out front at my house the other day, and there was a praying mantis. And it was so cute though, because my daughter was like, I wonder what it's praying about. But praying mantis, I'm not going to lie, they give me the heebie-jeebies, but it was like bright green, and its legs are they're creepy, but God made them, and so they're amazing. But you go on a walk with children, the flowers, right, the different birds, there's just endless things to talk about with your kids and point them back to the creator of them. So seize those opportunities, leverage those opportunities so that they at these early ages can look at just the awe that we should be in of God's creation, and they can associate who to point the credit to, right? Tree didn't just appear. God created the world. So we want to use those opportunities. Once they start to be school age, or even, start doing a friend's houses or wherever, maybe they're going to grandma and grandpa's or to cousins, and they come home or they approach you with questions that, they know or recognize or, contradict what the Bible says. Open up your Bible, point them to Scripture, say, that's a great question. Let's see what God has to say about it. Let's see things through a biblical lens and see what Scripture has to say about that. Don't be so quick to say, okay, what does Suri say? Alexa, get them in the rhythm of saying, I wonder what the Bible says about that. What a great habit for them to learn, and us too, right? We want that to be our ultimate source as well. So you want to leverage all these teaching opportunities. And another thing that, again, is in our day-to-day is when they're watching shows or they're listening to songs, or you're even at the park and you see two kids fighting or not sharing, whatever. You guys can think of different things that you encounter on a day-to-day. Say, what would God want them to do? Would God want them to treat them that way? And of course, we're not going to bash them. We're just going to say, hey, how would God want us to respond? Would God want us to yell at our mom? Does God want us to throw our toys? These are things we navigate within the home all the time. Point it back to God. What would God want us to do here? Because yes, as moms, hopefully we are mirroring what he wants us to do as we teach them, but don't have them point the credit to you. This is what God says. You need to answer to him, not me, And so we want to teach them that in just these day-to-day examples that leverage those teaching opportunities. Just 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, we were dropping my son off at basketball practice, and one of the perks to your kids getting a little older is they can start to buckle up themselves and get themselves out of the car, which really expedites the whole process. That can take 20 minutes, especially the more kids you have. So that's one of the benefits, but one of the drawbacks is that they open the car door themselves. So we pull up to the YMCA over here in Laguna Niguel, and we park, and my daughter opens the door, and you just hear this, and I was like, oh. That's probably what I did internally. I don't know what I did externally, but I was like, oh. And so I get out of the car, and my car's black, and it's couldn't have been a beat up, old buggy. It was a white Tesla. And I was like, oh no. So I walk over to see how bad the damage is, and luckily it was just a pretty small scrape on the passenger side, so not even on the driver's door, but on the passenger side. It was a fairly small scratch, but nonetheless a scratch. So we had a little talk about, needing to be careful and all that. And of course, we talk about, okay, what would God want us to do? I'm sitting there as a mom, how can I leverage this as a really good teaching opportunity of doing the right thing? Because it would have been easily be they're not going to see it. I probably could have gone any source I wanted to get the answer to justify my actions, but no, we do things God's way. So we wrote a note and, apologized and explained what happened. And I put the note on the passenger car side so they could see where it was at. Because honestly, it was small enough to where they might be I don't know what you're talking about. And so we leave the note, and I thought, I left my husband's number. I didn't blame it on him. I just thought he was more equipped to handle the situation. And so I left my husband's number, and just a few days later, the lady called, and she said, first and foremost, I just want to thank you for leaving that note. I thought that was such a godly thing to do. She said, I noticed the sticker on the back of your car and that you guys go to Compass Bible Church. She said, I'm a Christian too, and I just thought that was really uncommon these days, especially given the size of the scratch. She said, so I just wanted to thank you for that. And so that was sweet and encouraging. And she goes, I did get a couple quotes. She said, so I went to a place and the first quote I got was $900. And she was like, that just seems so unreasonable. It's like, can I just get some whiteout? It seems so unreasonable. And so she said, I actually went to get a second opinion. She went to a Tesla place, and they quoted her $1,300. She's like, well, that was no better. So she then called Tesla because she's leasing her car. And so she called them, and she said, hey, I got nicked. There's a small scratch. I just wanted to know whether or not this might be a part of normal wear and tear when I give the car in. And they said, yes, absolutely, you're good. And so she called my husband and said, again, thank you for doing the above reproach thing. Really, really appreciate it. I'm not going to charge you. I don't care that much, that there's a small little nick on my car door. And so we were able to walk away without having to pay anything, which was totally God's grace. But we didn't leave that note contingent on her not charging us. We knew very well, okay, we might have to pay for this, especially because it's a Tesla, and most people that drive Teslas care about how their car looks. That's not a bad thing. But she didn't mind that there was a scratch, and she didn't want to charge us so much money for it. And so we were able to just talk in such great length with our children about this whole situation. And we prayed God and we thanked God. And we told them, it doesn't matter what someone tells you, right, or what in your mind you think is right or wrong. You go to the ultimate source of truth. We pointed them back to God and said, what would he want us to do? He would want us to be honest, right? And so we were honest. And I even Googled, actually, just out of curiosity, some advice on what to do. I Googled, if I scratch a car, should I tell them? And I got 261 million results. I didn't read all of them. But there was a whole host. Some did have good suggestions, good God-honoring suggestions, but then there were some that weren't. And one of them that I read said, what did it say? It said, I'd just drive away like nothing happened. With a slight grin on my face, of course. And I was like, oh, bummer, but it just proved to my children that if we don't go to the ultimate source of truth, we really could probably go wherever we want. I could have called specific people to get them to say, you're good, just go, But no, we knew God would want us to seize this teaching opportunity, whether my kids were with me or not, to be honest and to do what he would want us to do. Because honestly, whether the owner of that car saw me or not, God did, right? And so I'm going to do what he would want me to do because I love him and I see things through the lens in which he wants me to. And so these are just a few of the very many things that you can do to help establish a worldview within your homes. But hopefully we see the importance of doing it. And so ask your leaders questions of other things you can do to implement. But I think even within these four will help you establish a good foundation of helping your kids to see things through God's lens. My son, he's in second grade now, which is wild. But one of the things that I love most about his class and his teacher and something she does is every Friday she sends him home with a weekly progress report. And the weekly progress report is purely based off his behavior. It has nothing to do with academics, which I love because as moms, when our kids aren't around, we're like, how they acting? We see how they are at home. And really, the hard work we do at home is to develop and send them out so that they can handle themselves in the world. So to get these weekly progress reports has been such a gift. And I am not boasting, although I am proud of him, but he's been getting stellar, progress reports since the beginning of the year. And we're so proud of him. But it was really such an encouragement to me as a mom. Again, okay, the fruit of your labor, keep teaching him, and he's learning how to navigate just different things within the classroom and how to submit to his authority and respect his teacher and collaborate well. It's just kind of a boost. But as I thought about this, and as much as I love him getting a good progress report from his teacher, what I want more than anything in the world is for him to get a good report card from God. I want him to get a good report card from God that he navigated situations and made decisions based on the way God would want them to, not the way the others around him would. That's what I want more than anything. And I want a good report card from God that I did everything I could in the years that he gave me with my son to help him and develop him to be able to navigate the world through a lens that God would want me to. And so in a world that doesn't have worldview anywhere on their radar, honestly, let's not be a part of that vast majority. Let's be moms who are intentional to teach our children the right way to view the world. And not just because it's best for them, but because it's also what most pleases God. So I hope you guys have great and honest discussions.